This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air with breaking news. The jury has reached an outcome, we're told, in the trial of Kim Potter, the former police officer facing manslaughter charges for the fatal shooting of 20-year-old Dante Wright. Potter said she mistook her firearm for her taser. Let's take you inside the courtroom now. We believe the jury is entering the room. Of course, we will not see them.
All right, please be seated. Members of the jury, have you arrived at a verdict? Okay. Would Ms. Potter please rise? I'm now going to read your verdicts as it will appear in the permanent court records of Hennepin County. In the matter of State of Minnesota versus Kimberly Potter, court file number 27CR217490, we, the jury, on the charge of manslaughter in the first degree while committing a misdemeanor on or about April 11, 2021, in Hennepin County, State of Minnesota, find the defendant guilty. And the verdict was agreed to at the hour of 11:40 a.m. and signed by the jury person on 12/23/21. The verdict on count 2 is we, the jury, on the charge of manslaughter in the second degree, culpable negligence on or about April 11, 2021, in Hennepin County, State of Minnesota, find the defendant guilty. And that verdict was agreed to at 10:30 a.m. on 12/21/21. Members of the jury, is this your true and correct verdict? So say you one, and so say you all.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, you may be seated. All right, I am now going to poll the jury. Juror number 2, is this your true and correct verdict?
It is.
Juror number 6, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes, it is.
Juror number 7, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes, it is.
Juror number 13, is this your true and correct verdict? Oh, it's juror 11. And juror 17, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 19, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 21, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 22, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 26, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 40, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 48, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
And juror number 55, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Members of the jury, when you first came into the courtroom, I told you that jurors are the heroes of our judicial system. Well, the 12 of you are our heroes in this case. You might remember that there was a question on the questionnaire that asked whether you wanted to be on this jury. You were to check yes, no, or maybe. A number of you checked no or not sure, and a few of you checked all three. But when I asked each of you if you would be willing to serve if the party selected you as a juror, you all said yes. You said yes even though we are in a pandemic with Omicron spreading in our community. You said yes even though you had concerns about serving given the nature of the case. You said yes even though you knew you would be sequestered during deliberations and away from your loved ones. You were willing to sacrifice much because you believed in our justice system. And then you went into deliberations, and each of you brought with you your common sense, individual perceptions, and life experiences, and you came to an agreement on the verdicts. You did your duty. I'm so proud of you. You should be proud of yourselves. Without civic-minded citizens like you, our system of justice could not function. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifices. I wish you all a wonderful holiday season, and may the peace and beauty of the season be yours throughout the year. At this time, I'd like you to go into your waiting courtroom, and I'll be in just a moment. I'd like to thank you personally and to answer any questions that you have. Okay?
Former police officer Kimberly Potter showing her face to the jury of 6 men and 6 women, delivering guilty verdicts on both counts, manslaughter in the first degree, manslaughter in the second degree, for the fatal shooting of Dante Wright.
Please be seated.
Following a traffic stop, the officer discharging her firearm, not her taser. The defense calling it a mistake, a human mistake. The prosecution pushing forward a case that it was reckless. Her actions were reckless. We want to go right now to NBC's Ron Allen, who is in Minneapolis. He's been following this trial closely for us. The jury certainly put in the work here. This obviously didn't come easily.
27 hours, Lester, over 4 days, and this is the verdict. And when it was read in the courtroom behind me, there's a small but determined band of protesters, demonstrators who've been here, and a huge cheer went up. It was a huge cheer that justice had been done for the Dante Wright's family. They have been out here day in and day out. It's been bitter cold. I can now hear some horns going in the streets. There's going to be a celebration and a big sigh of relief, I can say also, for this community that has been through so much. Remember, this is the same courthouse, and in fact the same courtroom where the former police officer Derek Chauvin, who killed George Floyd, was convicted of murder not long ago. And of course the Dante Wright incident happened while that case was winding down. So there's been a lot of pressure here. There's been a lot of concern about what this case might bring. But the bottom line is now it's brought justice for the family. And I can tell you, having talked to them and their attorneys over the weeks and months, that they're going to be relieved. They will tell you probably that it's not full justice because they don't get their son back, but it's some measure of justice that they have been able to prevail in the criminal justice system here. And we all know how rare it is for a police officer to even be charged, let alone convicted, in a crime involving the killing of a suspect. This is quite a step forward, many will say, who are watching the criminal justice system in the context of this racial reckoning that the country has been going through. Many will say that this is a big step forward, or at least a step forward, and one that I think a lot of people will honestly tell you they may not have expected. Remember, the defense argued in this case that Dante Wright was, they had authorization, legal authorization to place him under arrest. There was a bench warrant outstanding for his arrest. And the defense argued that Potter even had the authorization to use deadly force in that situation. Remember, this started as a case involving a young man who was pulled over because of an air freshener and because of expired license plate tabs. But then once they ran a background check on him, they realized there was this outstanding warrant, and the entire situation changed. But the bottom line is, prosecutors argued that Kimberly Potter had 26 years of experience. She should have known better. She was trained in how to handle a firearm, how to handle a taser. She should have known the difference between the two weapons. She acted recklessly, they argued, as she approached the vehicle, as she took out her gun, yelled taser. The very fact of not looking at the weapon, not noticing that it was a firearm and not a taser, was reckless, and she shot him at point-blank range in the chest. Now, in terms of the sentencing here, the maximum sentence for this first-degree manslaughter charge is 15 years in prison, and with sentencing guidelines, it's about half that. However, during the trial, the prosecutors argued there were aggravating circumstances, aggravating factors, and they are going to argue for a greater sentence in this case. Aggravating factors like injury caused to the other officers who were at the scene, injury caused to civilians who were at the scene. Remember, the car went down the road and crashed. All those aggravating factors, the prosecution is going to argue, should almost perhaps double the amount of time that Potter's in jail, they're going to argue. And you'll remember the same thing happened in the Derek Chauvin case, where he was sentenced in criminal court to 22.5 years, and now in federal court just recently this past week to more than 20 more years. But that same dynamic is at play here, and we'll see when the sentencing happens. But again, bottom line, she's guilty on both counts of manslaughter, and people who are supporting Wright's family are feeling a big sense of victory here. Lester?
Ron Allen outside the courthouse for us. Thank you. We continue to monitor developments inside the courtroom itself. We understand they're discussing bail as to whether former Officer Potter should be remanded into immediate custody. As that plays out, let me also bring in Paul Butler. He's a former federal prosecutor and an NBC legal analyst. Paul, let me begin about the difficulties of this case, what it represented. In terms of the prosecution, was this a difficult case to prove?
Every case against a police officer is a tough case for prosecutors, Lester, and this was especially difficult. Both the prosecution and the defense agreed that Officer Potter made a mistake, but the defense was a mistake is not a crime. The jury found that Miss Potter's mistake, which led to the death of an unarmed young man, that mistake was 2 crimes, manslaughter 1 and 2. To convict Ms. Potter of manslaughter, the jurors did not have to find that she intended to kill Mr. Wright, but only that she was reckless or negligent, and they found beyond a reasonable doubt that she was both.
All right, joining us now is former New York federal and state prosecutor Tali Farhadi and Weinstein. She's also an NBC News legal analyst. Tali, if I can bring you back to this question of sentencing, Ron Allen suggesting prosecutors will be looking for to be less lenient side. The fact that this really hinged on I guess her intent, and there was no intent to kill here, what does that say about how the sentencing may play out?
I think that it's unlikely that she will get the maximum sentence for either charge. Remember, she's looking at 15 years on the first-degree manslaughter, 10 years on the second-degree manslaughter. But as we heard earlier, the guidelines are generally to give about half of that, and which would amount to about 2/3 of the ultimate sentence in prison. And I don't expect that the prosecution is going to succeed in going up against that upper limit. One of the major considerations in sentencing is also whether the defendant had a criminal history, and Ms. Potter did not. These are her first convictions.
All right, Tali, thank you. We've been looking at Kim Potter in the courtroom. She showed no visible emotion, maintained her composure as the verdicts were being read. As we noted, she was not wearing a mask as the jury came in and delivered its verdict, perhaps wanting them to see all of her as this momentous sentencing or verdict came down in the courtroom. Let me go back to Ron Allen now as we continue to watch the developments in the courtroom as to what happens now for her. Ron, there was so much video evidence in this case. Her camera, the cameras of other officers, very, very strong images that, and even her reaction to firing the shot. How riveted was the jury to those videos?
I think everyone was riveted to that, Lester, and this was video that had never been seen by the public before. We'd all seen that one or two angles of the traffic stop from Potter's camera, but there were at least half a dozen or more officers' video, squad car video as well, that showed this whole sequence of events as it unfolded from so many different angles. There was really very powerful emotional testimony from not just Wright's mother, but also his girlfriend, who, remember, was the passenger in the car next to him. And she told the story of how after the car went down the road and how it crashed into another vehicle, how she tried to save his life by pushing on his chest, and how during a period of about 8 minutes or so, no one else was coming to help her try to do that. And this is part of the aggravating circumstances portion of the sentencing matter. The prosecution is going to argue, and has argued, that because Potter didn't tell her fellow officers what had happened, there was chaos, and that the prosecution inferred that there might have been a chance to save Daunte Wright's life had she communicated to her fellow officers that there'd been a shooting, that there was an unarmed man in the car, because the officers took that long to close in and to render aid once the car came to a stop down there. So that was very emotional. And remember, these are people from this community, and they know what has been happening here for the past year or so. So I think they were profoundly affected by seeing all this video and hearing this very powerful testimony. Lester?
All right, Ron, as you've been speaking, we've learned apparently the judge ruling there will be no bail pending an appeal. She will be remanded immediately into custody following the 2 guilty verdicts, manslaughter first degree and second degree against former police officer Kim Potter. That concludes our coverage of the verdict in the Kim Potter trial. We'll have more tonight when I see you on NBC Nightly News. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News Los Angeles. Good day.
You get unlimited on 2 or more lines for $20.